Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on your time zone. I know that here in Australia it's in the afternoon, so welcome. We're very delighted today to be co-hosting with the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature Asia Pacific, our second webinar exploring rights of nature developments around the world. And in a moment, we'll be able to introduce our guest speakers. But first, I'd like to do a short introduction and an acknowledgement of country, which is, to me, a very important tradition here in Australia. So as I mentioned, today is our second webinar in the GARN Asia Pacific Hub series. And in just a moment, Gina will be able to introduce the GARN Asia Pacific Hub to you all and tell you about the work that it does. In our first webinar 2 months ago, we were delighted to listen to speakers from Korea talking about developments for legal personhood. And today we're really honoured to have two esteemed speakers with us, Mr. Shari Jamil and Mr. Sarwar. So what I'd like to do first is just acknowledge country. So the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, if you're not aware of us, we're a small not-for-profit in Australia. We've been working to increase understanding of rights of nature and earth laws for over a decade. We're one of the oldest organisations in this space. We choose to work only in Australia, but connect with our international partners. So we are small but humble, but we run a whole range of multidisciplinary projects and programs in Australia. And a really important part of our commitment to building earth laws is acknowledging, honouring and working in solidarity with the First Nation peoples of this continent. So I'd like to acknowledge that I personally live, work and play on Kabi Kabi country. And when I'm up the back of my place looking out over the landscape, that's what I see. It's absolutely beautiful. And that's Jinnaburra country. So I'd like to acknowledge all First Nations peoples around the world, around Australia. And if folks are on this call, welcome and hello. So I'm here north of Brisbane, but this is the beautiful map of Aboriginal Australia with all of the governance structures that also implies. So here in Australia, we're working within AILA to explore what rights of nature and first laws look like in a post-colonial or colonial legacy country, and that work is very important to us. We'll be hosting a webinar about some of the work chugging along slowly in Australia in the next couple of months. But without further ado, what I'd like to do now is invite Gina, the wonderful Gina M, to talk to us all about the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature Asia Pacific Hub. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and thanks for our speakers and Michelle for hosting this wonderful webinar today. I'm Gina M from South Korea, and I'm one of the facilitators at the GARN Asia Pacific Hub, and I also serve as the Academic Affairs Manager at People for Earth Foundation in South Korea. Before we begin today's session, I would like to briefly introduce GARN and the Asia Pacific Hub. For those who may not be familiar, GARN stands for Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, which was founded in 2010 by global leaders who played a key role in advancing the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth in Cochabamba, Bolivia. GARN is a global network committed to promoting legal systems that treat nature as a rights-bearing entity, ensuring that rights of nature are recognized, respected, and implemented around the world. Within GARN, there are 5 regional hubs, including our hub, Asia Pacific Hub, and 4 thematic hubs. GARN also holds the International Rights of Nature Tribunal each year. The Asia Pacific Hub was created in 2022 during GARN's global gathering in Siena, Italy, to foster collaboration, outreach, and meaningful dialogue like our webinar right now in our region, and which is incredibly diverse in language, culture, and ecosystems. Currently, we have members from more than 20 countries, and our activities include outreach programs in Nepal, youth training session in Sri Lanka in 2023, and we also hold country-specific meetings online to introduce our hub and also build connections for future collaborations among members or with us, our hub too. And last year in April in the Philippines, we had our very first in-person gathering, with rights of nature advocates from 9 countries. It was a very meaningful moment as it marked the formal launch of the Asia Pacific Cup, and we also announced the Mount Puro Declaration, sharing our commitment to advancing the rights of nature movement in the region and also strengthening regional solidarity. We also had a chance to visit the indigenous community living near the Sierra Madre Mountain in the Philippines, which is under threat from a large-scale dam project. This visit reminded us of the importance and also the urgency of our collective action. In 2026, we will continue this webinar series bi-monthly until next year, and we will hold a hub meeting next month. We will decide the date soon, very soon. Also, a General Assembly later this year. This is the end of my short presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we will invite other speakers in the future for the webinar from various diverse backgrounds and countries. And if you want to become a member of GARN, you're always welcome. And yeah, thank you again. I will introduce Sharif. I want to give floor to Sharif Jamil, who is our member of GARN Asia Pacific Hub and also a country focal point of Bangladesh. And he also serves as the member secretary of DHORA and coordinator at Waterkeeper Bangladesh and the board member at Waterkeeper Alliances. Hi, good morning, Sharif.
Thank you very much. This is morning here in Bangladesh, but I'm sure you have joined from many places across the world. So very good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you. So let me go quickly about the formation of Bengal Delta. I'm sure many of you already know it, but almost 120 million years ago, after the breakup of Gondwana, the Indian tectonic plate started its northward journey, you might know. And about 50 million years ago, it collided with the Eurasian plate, and Indian plate went underneath, and that's why the Bengal fan came up. You can see Bengal fan at the last photo at the bottom of the slide, and this is still the largest subaqueous sediment storage in the world. That is the reason why the Tibetan plateau came up. And you know, from the Tibetan plateau, a lot of river systems actually brought civilizations in this subcontinent, and mostly Bangladesh is called still the Ganges and Brahmaputra Delta. That actually refers to this photo you can see at the right. Brahmaputra and Ganges traveled a long way from the Himalayas, and it carried a lot of silt and sedimentation and formed this Bengal Delta. And Bangladesh is a land of river. It's a riverine country. And the reason I'm telling all these things to you is to understand how much important it is to protect our river systems, to protect the nature, because everything is actually here created and developed and maintained by the health of the rivers of this land. Rights of rivers is a very much popular thing here these days, because after the verdict we got in 2020, Bangladesh High Court declared all the rivers are living entity. But I will try to let you understand the situation at the community level or at the ground level, how the rivers are right now in terms of their health. Here you can see a slide that shows the 3 major river systems. All the rivers of this country are actually dependent on these major 3 river systems, which is one is Ganges and Padma river system, another is the Brahmaputra river system, and another is Borak Meghna river systems. But basically, all the rivers are fed by the major river systems, and all these 3 river systems are coming from the upstream countries. And we have 57 recognized transboundary rivers in Bangladesh. Out of these 57, 53 are coming from India, 3 are coming from Myanmar, and 1 is going to India from Bangladesh. So mostly the transboundary river systems are basically standing on the rivers coming from the upstream country, more importantly India. And you can see how India constructed unilateral water diversion projects surrounding Bangladesh in the common river systems. So first, the river rights or free-flowing rivers aspiration is highly or seriously intervened by the unilateral water diversion projects in the transboundary common river systems. So this is one thing which is a reality we started experiencing since the independence of this country when the Farakka was commissioned on the Padma river system, which is Ganges. And then we have crisis inside the country. But I do not want to go in details about all of it. But we actually conducted three particular study to check conditions of three small but important rivers in this country in terms of the rights of the rivers, what the court's aspiration and verdicts and governance will be discussed by Professor Golam Sarwar. So I'm not going deep dive on this direction. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the practical situation in terms of the rights of the rivers. We studied thoroughly about three rivers. One is Kohelia. It is in the southeast part of the country in Cox's Bazar district, which is in Chittagong division. And another is Shonai River, which is in the northeastern part of the country in Sylhet division. And another is Andharmanik River, which is located in the southern part of the country. The Kohelia River, the rights of the rivers, that was not addressing actually one particular issue. The flow of water is important, but at the same time, encroachment and pollution are big problems in our country. Despite other interventions like cordon approaches, embankments, folders, sluice gates, those are there. But I want to expose here the main reason for us to be there and how we want these rights of the rivers should get the legal frameworks so that it can be implemented in practical terms. Kohelia River is a very small but very important river because a lot of people actually are living on this river in terms of fishing. But more importantly, this particular area is famous for the salt production. You know, Bangladesh is unlike other countries. It's a land of rice and curry. So salt is very much essential commodity for each and every family. And almost 100% salt production actually come from that particular area. And this particular river is very important for the salt transportation to the main part of the country. But there is a huge development activities going on. JICA or Japanese government came up with a big development plan. They call it MIDI, Maheshkhali Madarbari Integrated Development Initiative. They're constructing a deep seaport there. They set up power plants. And more importantly, because it is the reason why this river is killed, coal-based power plant, 1200 megawatt coal-based power plant called Madarbari Coal Plant. It's financed by Japan. And that coal plant actually is responsible to kill the river. To construct the approach road to the coal plant, they completely filled up 7.5 kilometer stretch of this river. And that's why the salt farmers cannot carry their salt anymore to the mainland or main part of the country. They need to do a detour and they need to go around a long way to carry salt. So rights of Kohelia is visibly and very much, aggressively violated by not necessarily Bangladeshi government or Bangladeshi construction workers. It is also violated by the foreign entities like Japan. And protests are there. You can see I am walking on the river when it was being filled up. And then there are huge protests from the salt farmers as well to protect this river. And another I told about Shonai River. Shonai River is very small, but that is a transboundary river, very important for the northeastern part of the country. And there is a big commercial building came up on the river, grabbing completely the river area. And we started protesting this from the very beginning when the construction work started. You can see how it was occupying the riverland when it was being constructed. Since 2011, we have been fighting against it with not much success. The construction was held for 2.5 years, and then again it constructed. And with the regime change here, new government took over, and you will be surprised to know that the owner of this property is now the member of parliament of that constituency. So this is a serious question how we can materialize the legal frameworks or how we can introduce necessary legal frameworks to actually uphold the rights of rivers. And the third one is Andarmanik River. I said, unlike the other rivers, it is important for another reason, which is, is the national fish of this country, and it's a migratory fish. During the spawning season, it comes to the sweet water to lay their eggs, and basically it's a sea fish, but it comes to the sweet water for laying their eggs. But when these baby hilshas go back to the river, back to the ocean, they actually take rest, or whatever you say, they stay a little bit of time on this Andarmanik River. So in the country where hilshas are available, those rivers are under high regulations in terms of catching hilsha. If you see the hilsha banning season for other rivers, that starts in March, but for this Andarmanik River, it is in November, because those sanctuaries are for mother hilsha, and this sanctuary is for baby hilsha. But this baby hilsha sanctuary is surrounded by all coal plants and scientifically not viable, but they constructed a deep sea port there, which is called Pairaf Port. And there is like big coal plants, 1320 megawatt Potuakhali power plant constructed right beside this Andarmanik River. So the baby Hilsha sanctuary is already in trouble because of the construction of these coal-based power plants. And power plant does not come alone, so there is huge industrialization going on around that area. There are also protests against this coal-based power production and this destruction to the Andarmanik River. But this is not only river. Nature is very important for this country because it's one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. So mangroves are basically protecting Bangladesh from the extreme weather patterns that are more recurrent and more intense these days coming up in the Indian Ocean, and that it's actually hit every year multiple times in the coast of the Bay of Bengal. So you might have heard the UNESCO World Heritage Site called the Sundarbans. Sundarbans is also in the coast, and it's the last habitat of Bengal tiger with the dolphin. This kind of rare species is there. But more importantly, it is the largest single-tract mangrove in the world, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is also surrounded by coal-based power plant hubs, and that's why Sundarbans is highly endangered. And we started working with UNESCO World Heritage Committee how we can protect this unique ecological treasure. And there are a lot of activities. Like in 2016, UNESCO sent a reactive monitoring mission to Bangladesh. They again sent it in 2019. They asked government to do strategic environmental assessment for the southeast and southwest, both the regions. Government came up, but they did not do it in a proper way. Just to give a sense of these destructive activities, you can see Sundarbans in the southwest part of the country, the blue section, but it is surrounded by coal-based power hubs, which are actually killing the Sundarbans. There are huge protests. We want the strategic environmental assessment should have scientific integrity. There should be a SEMP put in place, but these are not actually implemented or functional at the ground level. There are huge protests. It's ongoing. Not necessarily it started recently or it was stopped far back. It's been continuously going on. People are demanding to save those ecological unique treasures because the Bangladesh is highly dependent on natural health. health of the rivers, and of course, other ecosystems that are fed by the river systems. So I will stop here. I will be answering any questions, and I think the legal frameworks and the governance and implementation loopholes will be coming up from the presentation of Mr. Golam Sarwar. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Sharif. That was a very powerful story of some very big challenges facing your beautiful river system. So thank you very much. And now what we'll do is have questions at the end for both speakers. I hope that that's okay. And now I'd love to invite Golam Sarwar to join us, and I will spotlight him so everyone can see him. Over to you, Golam.
Thank you, Michelle. So good morning from Dhaka, and a very warm welcome to my presentation. The topic which I'll be talking today is rights of nature in Bangladesh, legal innovation or governance paradox. First of all, why I call it a legal innovation. Thank you, Sharif Bhai, for giving the background of rights of nature and the riverine and deltaic perspectives in Bangladesh. And this makes my job much easier to have the context before the legal framework or the legal discussion. So why I call it legal innovation, rights of nature. As you see from the presentation of Zina, that the rights of nature is gaining momentum across the world with probably more than 500 initiatives which are happening in different parts of the world. And Bangladesh also joins the rights of nature movement through a court verdict. I mean, the Supreme Court in our country recognized rivers as living entities. As you see that Bangladesh is a riverine deltaic country, it has a fluid ecological landscape. But over the years, the anthropocentric environmental law mostly followed the global international environmental law framework, which is extremely anthropocentric and which legitimizes environmental destruction. Because many legal systems in the world till date are responsible to legitimize and rationalize environmental destruction and the destruction of ecosystems, nature, and that ultimately lead to environmental polycrisis that we are witnessing in this current world. And Bangladesh is not an exception. Over the years, over the more than 50 years of this country, we have made our laws, we have made our policies, we have designed our governance in a way that basically rationalizes the destruction of nature. In this context, when the Supreme Court came up with a judgment that recognized rivers as living entities, so the judgment basically moves from anthropocentric to ecocentric dimension. But at the same time, I said in my presentation, I'll be discussing in my presentation that it's also a governance paradox, because the rights of river judgment at the same time create some solutions and also make some complexities also that may jeopardize the tentative solution or the prospective solution that it is imagined for. First of all, why or what prompted the court basically to come up with this judgment? As you see the three pictures from 2014, 15, and 16, and this is and this picture is about the Turag River, which is located in Dhaka, and which is extremely polluted. And this river is also facing encroachment from industrial river gravers, and also facing unprecedented pollution. So as you see, the gradual decline of these rivers is basically making it ecologically dead. So in a national English daily in Bangladesh called the Daily Star published a report on this river, the time to declare Turag dead. And this basically created an attention from the Supreme Court of Bangladesh that ultimately led to landmark judgment from the Supreme Court that declare rivers as living entities. And what is, in brief, the legal innovation? First of all, the Supreme Court declared rivers as living entities with legal rights. So unlike the corporations, unlike the children, unlike the human being, rivers can also go to the court and claim legal rights and entitlements before the court. So it's an ecocentric orientation as a legal subject, because over the years, as I have said, that our legal system, which is influenced by political economy factors, obviously, what Sharif Jamil Bhai has also indicated, that our development paradigm is extremely rooted in anthropocentric and growth-based approaches that basically rationalizes or that basically legitimizes the exploitation of nature. And the reason is that rivers, ecosystems were treated as legal objects. So what the Supreme Court judgment did, it gives an imagination that the rivers cannot be treated as legal objects. You cannot treat it for the exploitation of human being and commit endless, exploitation or endless economic growth based on the exploitation of rivers. So it gives a reimagination for an ecocentric orientation as legal subject. And the judgment also declared that river encroachment and river pollution as criminal offenses, and it also brings the criminal jurisprudence and brings the attention of criminal justice system also to deal with the unprecedented river pollution and encroachment. And most importantly, the judgment makes the National River Conservation Commission as the legal guardian to protect and conserve and preserve the water ecosystems and the water bodies, including rivers. So with this, the Supreme Court basically has given 17 directives. So I'll not, go into the details of this judgment. I'll be highlighting some of the key aspects of the judgment and the complexities and the paradox, probably that jeopardize the potentials of this judgment. So what prompted the court, that I have indicated before, unprecedented river giving and pollution basically causing river disappearance. Over the last 50 years, as we have seen, that 158 rivers have dried up or near extinction, and more than 56 rivers suffers from extreme pollution. And obviously, pollution is, hampering the river, the water flow of the rivers, and also jeopardizing the ecological health of the rivers. Rivers around Dhaka are considered ecologically dead, and this is acknowledged by the National River Conservation Commission itself. So it's hampering and it causing mostly what it causes basically, what river pollution, what river encroachment cause to the communities, what it means for the communities basically. That, as I have said, that Bangladesh is a delta country, so it has a fluid ecological phenomena which is extremely overhauled, which is extremely disrupted by the dominant development paradigms and the anthropocentric legal frameworks. And the sufferers are the communities, the riverine communities. The riverine communities for hundreds of years, they're living with rivers, with harmonious relationship, with interdependent relationship, with reciprocal relationships. So this interdependent, this harmonious relationship have been facing acute crisis because of this river pollution and river encroachment. And environmental laws, as I have said, the environmental laws are failing. There are a remarkable number of environmental laws, more than 200 environmental laws in Bangladesh, but there exists widespread failure of enforcing environmental laws. And this failure leads to normalized non-compliance in our context. As you see that industrial expansion, and the rapid urbanization, mostly in Dhaka, basically normalize the non-compliance of environmental laws. So it's the political economy, it's the maldevelopment, it's the polluted development that basically helps to normalize the non-compliance of environmental laws, and it leads to fragmented environmental governance also, and which is mostly bureaucratic-led, top-down governance, undermining the local communities on the ground. So this basically prompted the court to come up with this radical transformative judgment. As I have said, the rivers and Bangladeshi people and the riverine people are extremely connected, interconnected, which is the core aspect of the rights of nature movement across the world. That people and river are not basically, in a competition scenario. They are in a collaborative, harmonious, relationships. So in our context also, Bangladesh delta, as a delta country, it has historical, cultural, and socio-economic aspects that the rivers and the communities are living interdependent relationship. The cultural affinity and belongingness of the communities are interconnected with the rivers. As I said, that rivers through their waves, tributaries, distributaries carry an image of a society which portray the ups and downs of the stories of the people's lives and livelihoods in our context. And what legal personhood means or implicates in our context, basically, as I said, it provides a new way, new imagination of looking into the relationship between people and nature, between riverine people and the rivers in our context. So it is infusing legal system with ecocentric values, going from the dominant anthropocentric or it goes direct or it provides direction to a post-anthropocentric approach that challenges the law's individualistic and instrumental paradigm that I have said, that the current legal system consider river as legal objects, consider rivers as properties, resources that basically justifies their exploitation. So what legal personhood does, it basically recognizes the rivers' interdependent relationships. It was declared as a special measures in a specialized important circumstances that I have just underscored in my previous slides. So what the court used the legal interpretation to come up with judgment. The court obviously used the constitutional provisions that obviously recognized environment in our context. Article 18A of the Bangladesh Constitution basically recognized, or it imposes obligation on the shoulder of the state that you have responsibility to protect and preserve the state. And Article 21 of the Constitution also makes the state as a trustee to conserve and protect the natural resources, which, as we all know, that public trust doctrine is mostly, exercised as a tool, as a legal tool to come up or to implement the rights of nature, paradigm or the rights of nature discourses. And in our context also, the Supreme Court utilized this public trust doctrine to implement the rights of nature paradigm in our context, and it obligates the state as a trustee to protect all natural resources and ecosystem in our context. Interdependence, what the judgment has covered, also the interdependence of humans and nature, that just like a guardian who always seeks to protect and develop their children, mankind also, humans also are also responsible to protect and develop the environment as its guardian. So it's again promoting an interdependent relationship, not a competitive aspects rather than a collaborative aspects, because the human existence depends on the state of the environment, which is rooted in Earth's jurisprudence, an ecological jurisprudence that basically says that people will live with an interdependent relationship, not with the human dominance or the primacy of the human being, or the primacy of growth-based development will be subordinated to nature. That basically, rooted into the discussion of Earth jurisprudence or ecological jurisprudence. So nature expects lawful behavior from mankind or from humans, which indicates that nature has a legal right to sustain itself. That is basically the rights of nature paradigm. And the rights of nature obviously has also challenged the dominant paradigm. As I have said, it provides an ecocentric orientation to our dominant development paradigm, including the sustainable development, because sustainable development is a buzzword which is being used in our development plans and policies. But at the same time, we need to understand the paradigm of sustainable development is also extremely flawed, because the sustainable development is also basically in another, a new bottle, basically. To justify the same development logic, to justify the same growth-based logic, basically. It is also rooted in the dominant development paradigm. That's why sustainable development needs also reinterpretation to prioritize ecology, to prioritize nature over economic growth. So these aspects of this judgment to reinterpret the sustainable development is also being highlighted in our context, and it imposes an obligation on the shoulder of the National River Conservation Commission, which is declared as which is declared as legal guardian to protect rivers, that you need to provide a no objection certificate, or you need to obtain a no objection certificate from the NRCC before initiating any development programs regarding any rivers. So it basically gives a chance to scrutinize development programs for the sake of protecting rivers from harmful development interventions. So what are the potential implications that I have just highlighted from this judgment? So it provides a new kind of imagination to reorient human behavior with ecocentric orientation, and an ecocentric orientation of law and policy mostly. And secondly, to reinterpret the nexus, the state, economy, society, because our current dominant legal framework, which is influenced by the political economic factors, which is influenced by the dominant development paradigm, is basically undermine nature, and there is a nexus between state, economy, and society in undermining nature, in undermining ecosystem. So we need to reinterpret the nexus with the help of the rights of nature paradigm. And if we need to challenge the state-based top-down governance approaches also, which rights of nature is offering a new paradigm. To challenge the growth-based development that I have just highlighted, I'll not be repeating on this, to reinterpret sustainable development with ecological priorities, with the primacy of nature. In a deltaic country, how can you imagine growth over nature? So we are advocating rights of nature, that the sustainable development needs reinterpretation with clear prioritization of nature over economic growth. And that's how we can basically embed ecological community governance. So we need to go back to the community to learn local knowledge, to learn local practices that were historically helpful to protect rivers across the country. So we need to integrate ecological community governance in our context. And governance paradox, the final few slides of my paper, why I call it governance paradox. So the judgment created some complexities also, which may jeopardize the potential of the judgment, or the potential paradigm which Bangladesh is imagining in terms of rights of nature. Because the NRCC, which is considered as the legal guardian in our context, because the guardianship arrangement we see for the protection of rivers see a diverse arrangement. For example, in Colombia, for the Atrato River, we see a collaborative approach. So it's the collaborative between governance, between government and communities. But in our context, excuse me, and in the Indian context also, we see that when the rivers Ganga and Jamuna was given legal personhood, they assigned guardian to the government entities. And in our context also, our Supreme Court also assigned legal guardianship to the National River Conservation Commission, which is a bureaucratic body runs under a ministry of the government, which I consider as a problematic aspect. Unless and until you make a combination of hybrid governance by making a formalized alliance between state enforcers like River Conservation Commission and the communities, the guardianship arrangement might fail. Because NRCC, the National River Conservation Commission, is extremely failing, since it is a government organ. And a government organ, how can it hold the government encroachers accountable? Because in our context, environmental pollution, rivers encroachment, river pollution are mostly caused by government agencies, state agencies. So how a government entity can hold the government agencies accountable, being itself as a government entity? So it again rooted into the top-down approaches, which rights of nature wants to dismantle. The this is one of the paradox or the dilemma we are suffering from the rights of nature paradigm in our context. So it again relies on the bureaucrat-led top-down governance, which is extremely failing our nature over the years, as we have just discussed. NRCC over there has become ineffective. It doesn't have any legal mandate. It doesn't have any enforcing authority even to protect and oversee the governance of the rivers. And most importantly, the judgment has extremely failed to explicitly acknowledge the role of communities in river governance. So in a delta governance that I have repeatedly underscored, the communities have a bigger role in river governance over the years. They have traditional knowledge, they have local practices, they have cultural rights, they are in a deep, reciprocal relationship, but the judgment has failed to explicitly recognize the role of communities in river governance. That makes the whole governance as a paradox that may jeopardize the governance arrangement in relation to rivers. So my final slide is basically we should move ahead. And how can we move ahead with this new paradigm that is basically challenging the dominant development paradigm, that is challenging the dominant anthropocentric paradigm? How can we move forward basically? So we need legal reform. We need an overhaul and a legal reform in our context. And this is basically this should come parallelly from across different jurisdictions, so that we can also challenge the international environmental law, which shapes and influences the domestic environmental law. So we need legal reform to integrate, to embed ecocentric aspects and ecocentric orientation of law. Secondly, we need hybrid governance, that I have just said, that we need hybrid governance by making a formalized alliance between state enforcers like NRCC, like Department of Environment, which is a demigod in our context, and which is extremely corrupted body in our context, or a politicized body in our context, that basically facilitate the destruction of ecosystems. So we need to challenge those bureaucratic top-down governance with the hybrid governance, with the active participation of the communities. With the community stewardship in our context, that community should be empowered. And if we engage communities without being empowering also, they might face also victimization from the governance, from the state enforcers. So we need to engage communities with proper legal recognition, with proper empowerment, with financial incentives. And most importantly, we need to integrate community justice in our legal frameworks. Only then probably we can reimagine the rights of nature paradigm, and that will help us to respond to the environmental polycrisis that we are facing and witnessing in this present world. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you so much. Fantastic presentation, making it very clear where the rights of nature movement is going, legally speaking, in Bangladesh. There are a couple of questions have come in, which is wonderful, and I'll come to them in just a moment. So perhaps if I could just recap, because I have a couple of questions about the implementation possibilities, if that's okay. So to recap, the Turag case in 2019 didn't just say that the Turag River has legal rights. It said all rivers across Bangladesh are living entities. Is that correct? Yes. And you've very carefully outlined the enforcement and implementation problems, which we definitely see in other countries too, if the government is left in charge of trying to do what it couldn't do with environmental law. So perhaps my question to you is, if the National River Conservation Commission has been named as the legal guardian, could you tell us a bit about, has it done anything to try to enforce the rights of rivers? And if it has, that's great. I'd love to hear that. And then the second question would be, can you talk a bit about what specific changes could be made to bring more community voices into the governance? And then I'll have a question for you too, Sharif, but perhaps you can answer that one together. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Very pertinent question, I would say. So what they did basically, so over the years, as I have said, the governance is paralyzed and dysfunctional in the context of rivers. So what they did, the former chairman of the National River Conservation Commission, he was personally very enthusiastic and very active. And what they did basically, they have identified a list of river gravers and encroachers. And Sharif Bhai will definitely add on this. And finally, and what they did at some point, that they removed the list of gravers from the website. And that this indicates that there was some political influence, political intervention, and which basically subsequently helped to remove the incumbent chairman. I mean, the former chairman also, and I mean, an NRCC chair was removed because of his active involvement with the river governance. So this indicates that how the NRCC is being, I mean, politicized and at the same time interfered by political and bureaucratic interventions. So this one thing they have done, and what they recently has done, what we have noticed, that they have drafted a law by declaring rivers as living entities and accommodating the aspects of the directives of the judgment. But at the same time, this arrangement of the law, how they are reimagining of the law, has some extremely faulty aspects, because in this drafted law also they have failed to come up to integrate the communities mostly, and they are still relying on top-down governance. So this will make the same problems more complex. So even if there is a draft law, I think this draft law needs more reimagination. This is one thing. And the second thing, this relates to your second question, how we can, I mean, integrate the community voices. What I said, that communities are working across the world. And I can see Sharif Bhai is working a lot on community engagement with the rivers. I mean, he has contributed to develop a vast, wide network across Bangladesh with the communities. So communities are there on the ground. So we need to mobilize them basically with legal recognition, with integration of communities into the governance, and with providing incentives, and so that they can empower themselves. So that's the way we can basically integrate the community voices.
Thank you.
I'm sure that Sharif Bhai will add on the community perspective.
Yes, I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly on the role that you and your groups have played in protesting and raising awareness of the plight of the rivers. Sharif, your comment?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure you already have heard from Sarwar Bhai that we not only got the legal framework to protect our river systems when the rights of rivers verdict came up in 2019. Since 1950, when the State Acquisition and Tenancy Act was introduced in this land, then the land management manual to the Deputy Commissioner says how they need to protect the river systems. And in 1966, the port rules also says what would be the legal definition of a river and what could be the legal size of a river in Bangladesh. So the River Conservation Commission was introduced before this verdict coming up. And there were several chairmen, as you heard from already him, that one chairman was very proactive when he wanted to protect the river systems. So he came up with this list of encroachers with the existing river legal frameworks. But at the same time, he also introduced a unique thing, which is river conservation committees. He instructed the deputy commissioners, which is the district administration head, to form a district river conservation committee. Similarly, the sub-district river conservation committee and divisional river conservation committee. And those committees were supposed to include community leaderships in the committee. And that committee was supposed to do regular meetings in terms of follow-up and monitoring the encroachment, river quality, and etc. But unfortunately, since he left the office, that committee did not regularly have their meetings, and they did not come up with any more actions in terms of protecting our river systems. So basically, whatever legal frameworks you come up with, it needs the institutional goodwill to implement it. And that actually is very much dependent on the person who is running this department in a country like Bangladesh. And political will is very important to make this possible, because when this verdict came up, that very chairman actually came up with a draft how it can be implemented, because the court verdict did not only recognize the rights of rivers, they also said how it should be operationalized. As for example, they said they expect government would take proper initiative to actually give legal empowerment to the River Conservation Commission so that the other line ministries or departments who are managing our river systems can be accountable to a mechanism run by the River Conservation Commission. So in conclusion, I must say what legal frameworks we come up with doesn't matter if we don't have the goodwill of the government or leadership to implement it, and which is very much lacking in our country. I am sure legal frameworks are important, but at the same time, implementation is more important than the legal frameworks that come up. And to empower community, it's not necessarily empowering socially. We have to legally empower them if they want to take part to effectively managing our rivers in a proper way. Thank you.
Thank you. And we find the same issues in Australia and in other countries all around the world, this endless debate that the governments of the day see that think that they are in charge, but they do not put the effort, resources, or human power behind actually enforcing any of the existing or new laws. We've got just a couple of minutes for a quick couple of questions. Janif has asked a good question for Golam. She says, thank you for your powerful presentation. Do you think the enforcement of the rights of nature in Bangladesh would have been different if it was done through a legislative act rather than a judicial decision?
I think the question comes with my previous discussion that the judicial recognition or the judicial pronouncement is not enough, obviously, and it could be better if we can come up with a law that basically creates a whole benchmark for the implementation of the rights of nature, because we see lots of Supreme Court directives or High Court directives that basically created benchmark for landmark rulings for expanding the jurisprudence of environmental. But on the ground, we see no implementation of the court directives, which makes, again, which raises the question of integrity also of judicial directives. So obviously, a law can work much better than the judicial recognition.
Thank you. And just one final question for both of you. It's actually a very paraphrased question from Claudia. When the rights of nature decision was being developed or even argued for, to what extent was rights of nature also addressing the drivers of the environmental problems in the first place, such as the land use, the economic issues and poverty? To what extent was rights of nature even thinking about those drivers? I'm not sure if either of you would like to address that.
I am sure he will supplement, but my perception is rights of nature or rights of rivers is a very new thing among the policymakers, of course, but also at the community level. I mean, like still people think river as a commodity. They just go and exploit the river systems everywhere. So the rights of rivers itself requires some community interpretation, how they can understand the importance of it, they can understand the scientific reality behind it, and they can relate it to their life and livelihood. If the community can understand and realize that, then the policymakers will be coming up on board. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Golam, a final comment?
Yeah, obviously, I agree with Sharif Jamil by that community engagement in terms of community engagement, also we need to be cautious so that the community might not face the burden of the governance. So we need to be very cautious with proper recognition, proper incentives, and obviously by integrating them into the governance and the justice system, not mere recognition and in paper recognition, but with some physical, recognition infrastructure that is currently lacking. So that basically can help us to integrate the communities into the governance.
Thank you so much. Look, I think we could have had a multiple-hour conversation about this, and I'd love to invite you both back later in the year, both for the Asia Pacific Hub and also for some rights of nature workshops we'll be hosting in Australia. It'd be good to have some online discussions about how we really focus in on the community role, how we define community, how we support their role, and how we can implement some of these great ideas. But for now, I do apologize. We'll have to jump off. A huge thank you to our wonderful speakers, and a thank you to Gina Im, my co-pilot in our webinar series. But for now, thank you, everyone. The recording will be available on the GARN website and the AILA website within a week or so. So again, thank you to our wonderful speakers. and have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, and day in general. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.